This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Hi and welcome back to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. So, I'm feeling quite relaxed as I record this episode. I've spent the last week exploring the southwest of Scotland, near Dumfries and Galloway with my family, my wife and 2 kids. I've got to say, it's a beautiful area, beautiful part of the world, and yeah, we got lucky with the weather too. There's lots of rolling hills, some nice little coves and beaches, and loads of places to explore. And also my obsession with cold water, which I've alluded to in the past, well, I put this to the test in the sea, and thankfully I didn't need to use my inner coach. The reason being was the temperatures were around about 14 degrees, which I'm able to tolerate fairly easily now, and I really enjoyed waking up most mornings, going for a swim in the sea. The water at Doon Bay where we were was really calm, and it was quite an exhilarating feeling to be swimming outdoors in absolutely beautiful surroundings. And going back to my inner coach comment about going into cold water, when you go into really cold water, less than 10 degrees, often you've really got to work on your own internal dialogue. It's so easy to talk yourself out of it. So being calm and compassionate to yourself can be a big help. Now, this is relevant to this episode because we're going to think about the words that you say as coaches. And on this topic, I spotted an interesting article in The Guardian earlier this week. It was titled, "Compassion Can Produce Better Performance. Just Look at the Lionesses." And it was written by Kath Bishop. So this is highly relevant to the coach-athlete relationship, which, if you've looked at my Instagram page this week, Mental Toughness Matters, you're going to see that I've posted a lot about the coach-athlete relationship. And it was always something on my agenda to create in this episode. So, going back to the article, Kath goes on to mention how elite and high performance and the words compassion don't usually mix in the same sentence. And you could argue the same about mental toughness and compassion, but you'd also be wrong. She goes on to talk about the old-fashioned need for fear and harsh criticism to toughen people up, to improve resilience levels of players or athletes. And she refers to the military when she talks about this stereotypical behaviour. Now, if you go back through the archives in this podcast, if you go to episode 123, with the late Richard Dorney, he talks about resilience in the military, and you're going to see that this is definitely not the case today. That compassion shines through in the way leadership go about their jobs in the military. However, if we're honest, there are plenty of teams, plenty of workplaces where the tough love message, if you like, is given out. So we've got to respect this. Yet as Kath states, coaches really should look to open their eyes and their ears to the work of people like Kristen Neff and other researchers who focus on compassion, self-compassion, and its relationship with well-being and performance. Kath mentions that compassion taps into our biological hardwiring rather than activating our threat system. Compassion, it goes on to help us feel safe, protected, which means we can learn and we can connect to others and really start to explore what we're capable of. And on support versus challenge, naturally in elite sports, players and athletes require challenging. They require high standards being communicated to them. But they also need support. And top football managers and managers in general, they recognise this. Kath cites the example of Serena Wiegman, the England women's football coach, and her response to Lauren James's recent red card against Nigeria in a World Cup match. Wiegman showed a human side. She talked about the fact that we all make mistakes and that she would give Lauren James a hug. And when you consider the needs of the individual, Lauren James in this case, how would shouting at her actually help her? Would she actually learn from the situation or the experience? I very much doubt it. It would be much more difficult for her. And you've also got the team side of things, ranting and raving, in effect losing control of your emotions, an important part of mental toughness. So as a coach, losing control of your emotions, what message does that actually send to your players? They're going to copy you, right? Their decision making is then going to be impaired, especially when the pressure's on. You might even find that rifts appear between teammates too. So a question for you as a coach: when big failures, when crises occur, how do you respond? What tone of voice do you tend to fall back on? Is your body language one of a cool customer, or is it one of somebody who gets riled up? A little bit of food for thought for you. Compassion in psychological research circles has been shown to decrease fear of failure and increase perseverance when mistakes occur. That's right, coaches who are calm and supportive are more likely to gain a positive reaction from athletes and from players. Quite interesting, eh? And other research tells us when we look at compassion and mastery-focused goals that these are linked to concentration, that they're linked to learning, continuous improvement, versus short-term wins or losses. So it makes so much sense. This whole thing about focusing on the process that you often hear. This can definitely pay dividends by being more compassionate and supportive. So those people, those coaches who get transfixed on winning, on losing, on outcomes essentially, please do take note. Kath also introduces the work of Professor Sophia Jowett, who studies the coach-athlete relationship and has a wide body of research in this area. I've got to say, it's definitely worth looking at her work, and I've put some links in the show notes regarding this. She's found that the power-based relationships, they create unhelpful competition, cliques, fearfulness, added stress, and a whole lot more, which aren't going to be helpful towards performance. Jowett goes on to advise that there's something in collaborating with athletes or players, throwing your ego to one side. So being a coach who doesn't see themselves as an expert, who encourages risk-taking, creativity, and then tries to align everybody to values and goals. And one thing to note on this supportive and compassionate theme is typically players who are younger are less mentally tough, and they might require more support than experienced senior professionals. I've been in dressing rooms where 17 and 18-year-olds have been lambasted in front of the group, in front of senior professionals and their teammates. Now, how is this going to help them? How is this really going to build their confidence? I'm not so sure. Many dressing rooms or changing rooms, even at professional level, have a lot of teenagers or men and women who are in their early 20s. These athletes and players really do need your support as a coach. Challenge them by all means, but be aware by challenging players, by challenging athletes too much may well have a negative impact. So I'd encourage you just to reflect upon your relationship there. How much of the time do you challenge? How much of the time do you support? Is it a 50-50? Is it a 70-30? Is it an 80-20 in favour? Have a little think about that. Now, I've added links in the show notes to the Guardian's article by Kath Bishop. You're also going to find links to Kristen Neff's work, to Sophia Jowett's work, and also episode 123 by the late Richard Dorney MBE, who sadly passed away last November. This is also featured as we looked at developing resilience in the military. And, if you've enjoyed this episode, or recent episodes for that matter, please do feel free to rate this podcast favourably on Apple. A 5-star review, nudge nudge, wink wink, and some kind words really does help us reach more people and positively impact on more lives, which is why I run the show essentially. Have a fun week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.